Well, thanks for being here, everybody. I'm going to talk about a place or places that my husband Terry and I truly enjoy. And the photograph here is Torres del Paine, absolutely gorgeous, very famous national park in southern Patagonia on the Chilean side. And Torres means towers in Spanish, so you can see where that name comes from. Paine is from an indigenous language and it means blue. And if you see the glaciers up close, or the calved glaciers in some of the lakes that are at the bottom of these peaks, they are a deep, dense blue. They're absolutely gorgeous. It's a stunning place, full of great trails and wildlife and really fun to visit. So, oh, wrong PowerPoint. A media consultant suggested that I include this slide. It's an opportunity to show off, obviously, but I thought that's kind of crazy. But then I thought, well, this is probably part of the attraction of Terry and me to the Southern Hemisphere, because what we used to do is chase big waves. I was the only one who went out that day, and I didn't get locked in, but I did make the wave and kick out. Live to tell the story. So, but anyway, yeah, we grew up in the surfing culture, and I think that's one of our draws to the endless summers. Okay, now on to the real stuff. So, just to give you an idea of some of the variety that we experience when we're in these areas. So we have been throughout Patagonia in Argentina. We've been to southern Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego, the very corn on the Chilean side, and Tierra del Fuego actually is split. So we've been on the Argentinian side as well. Then we've also been in what's called Chile Chico or Central Chile, which is the Lake districts. And as you can see, it is a great variety of landscapes. So starting up there with PN, that stands for Parque Nacional, or the national parks. The National Park of Patagonia is in Argentina. And it's a fairly new national park. They are public lands, the national parks. They're managed somewhat differently than the United States, but they are all public lands. This one was actually one of the reasons for preserving this land was a bird, the hooded grebe, which is a critically endangered species, has a very limited range and a particular habitat need, which are wetlands and small lakes of the high Andes with particular kind of vegetation. I've looked and looked. I've not seen a hooded grebe. They're a very attractive little bird. So moving on to the Strait of Magellan, you spend a lot of time riding on ferries when you're visiting these areas. And in order to get to Tierra del Fuego, the archipelago, you have to cross the Strait of Magellan. This is a rather typical crossing. You're down in even lower than the roaring 40s, you're in the roaring 50s, and you really get to understand what that's all about with some of the wind that blows. And it isn't uncommon to cross the straits with this. I mean, this wind was, it's a fairly large ferry that carries automobiles and everything. It was rocking this, and in contrast to what I think would go on in the United States, weren't all instructed to sit with seatbelts, we could all be up walking around and kind of crashing into one another and everything. And the really interesting part was as the pilot brought it into the shore on the other side, he actually had to tap in order to hit the wharf. So it's a pretty, these can be pretty exciting ferry rides. Tierra del Fuego National Park, I took that because it shows the typical hardwood forests that are found in some of the areas. So these trees are Southern Beech is a predominant one, or Notophagus. And I always feel when I'm walking through these just scrumptious forests, like I'm in a fairyland. You can kind of, just get an idea that it feels like you're sort of in a fairy tale. They're really quite beautiful. So going back to the other side, the Maguin is the name of these very prominent wetlands that are throughout the Patagonian prairies. And then a picture of Tierra del Fuego. A lot of the Grand Island, it's actually an archipelago, but a lot of the Grand Island is steppe, and so that's a fairly characteristic a landscape that you'll see on the island. La Campana, the national park, actually is north of Santiago, so at the very tip of the Chile Chico, and that's a characteristic landscape of the coast ranges of Chile. La Campana is that mountain. It means bell in Spanish, and I think it's the highest peak in the Chilean coastal range. That landscape, as you can see, it's rather arid. It's reminds me very much of California or Mediterranean kind of very much like the California Coast Range, actually. A little bit further north, actually, is the Limari River Basin. And this area is getting into the desert of northern Chile. But there are these really large river valleys that flow out of the Andes and across. And so there are these kind of oases where you see a lot of very rich agriculture. And what was interesting about this basin is the Valle del Encanto, or Enchanted Valley, was a good demonstration of it. Human habitation is very old here, and what this is showing, it doesn't really show all that well, but there were a lot of petroglyphs in the area, in old fishing culture and agricultural cultures of pre-colonial times. The Glacier National Park, actually, that's what that is, Pien Los Glaciares, is in Argentina, and it's a very high Andean, actually, as you can see, a lot of it above the tree line. It's another kind of different landscape that you can see. Chiloé is a large archipelago also on the western coast of Chile. And it again is another example of hardwood forest. This was a reserve with protected deer and other species. And then finally, the Lake District is where a lot of the active volcanoes of Chile are. There was a large eruption last year. The volcano shown here, Volcan Osorno, it has not erupted for a little over 100 years, and this lake, Lago Yanquihue, is almost like an inland sea. It's absolutely huge, but this whole district is just covered with lakes. So, and that city is Bariloche. It's the gateway to the Argentinian Patagonia. It sits at the foot of the Andes, sort of in the northern part of Patagonia. And it's a very popular tourist center. We're actually traveling. We tend to go in February, which is kind of the equivalent of August here. And as in Europe, August is sort of the travel month for Europeans. February is kind of the travel month for Argentinians and Chileans. So we're often in these places traveling with local tourists as well, which makes it kind of a fun adventure. And Bariloche is a very popular tourist center that we visit, and it's mostly with locals. It's quite a pretty old city. Ushuaia is on Tierra del Fuego on the Argentinian side, and it's actually an old naval port. It was where the Navy, where the ships for the Falkland War were housed. So, but it's again really quite striking and beautiful, and it truly is the southernmost city in the world. That's what they have as recognition. Santiago is the capital of Chile. The top right-hand pictures. I guess I should. Sorry about that. Back up. See if I can get back up, because I want to talk a little bit about Valparaiso. No, that isn't previous. This computer doesn't like me. It's Jenny's picture. We'll see. Can you back it up? Good. Forward.
That's the old thing is probably doing.
Sorry. See, I told you it likes Jenny's fingers and not mine. So anyway, Santiago is a beautiful sort of modern city. And then finally, I think probably my favorite city, we don't spend a lot of time in the cities, is Valparaiso. Valparaiso is the second oldest colonial city on the Pacific coast, as the early sailors were able to make their way around the Cape Horn. It's very challenging. You can guess that from crossing the Strait of Magellan. They first set up a city called Valdivia, which is a port a little bit south of Valparaiso, and then the second one is Valparaiso, and it is a pretty old port city. Reminds me, I was born in San Francisco. Reminds me of San Francisco in my youth, and loved by Pablo Neruda as well, who's the famous Chilean poet, and he wrote Ode to Valparaiso, which is, I've taken a phrase here that I just love. Valparaiso, que cabeza con cerros, despreñada, no acabas de ponerte, which it translates, Valparaiso, what head of hills, disheveled, you hardly comb your hair. So just a little bit about the economics of these places. A lot of extraction and mostly agricultural. So livestock is big throughout Patagonia. Sheep, of course, is, I think, kind of what you think of, especially on the Argentinian side. The Welsh settlers early on brought sheep, and there are sheep estancias, huge sheep farms, particularly all over Argentinian Patagonia. But also cattle and horses. And these photographs kind of give you an idea. They feel more like feral life. I mean, they're just sort of running in just huge open areas. They're pretty prominent throughout, especially the more steppe areas of Patagonia. Other products, especially in the Central Valley and these river oases in the warmer areas, we're down there eating just wonderful produce that you're also eating, and it's not quite as fresh. So, because a lot of our winter produce, and a huge variety of it, come from Chile, particularly. And then, as I mentioned, the forests are hardwood. They're very, very slow growing. There are a variety of hardwoods, predominant the southern beech or nothofagus, but there are other kinds of hardwoods as well. And with colonial settlement, there was a lot of heavy logging, and they're very slow growing trees. And there hasn't been complete recovery. So in their place, tree farming it continues, but replaced with eucalyptus. They actually farm eucalyptus and make a lot of furniture with the wood. And also replaced by a North American pine. There is a Chilean pine, but they replace it with a faster growing North American pine, and that's what they grow. And it's pretty prominent tree farming. Commercial fishing continues, and also sports fishing has become very, very popular, both with the locals, and it's a big tourist economy as well, throughout a lot of South America, actually. And then the final one that I need to mention is salmon farming. The salmon are Pacific salmon that were actually introduced. As with Atlantic salmon farming in the Puget Sound, it's a highly controversial practice, but it is all over the place. I mean, you see these net pin farms, you kind of see it on the opposite shore there. You see them in all of the fjords, all the way up into rivers, and it's not looked at as a very environmental practice, and is not. And so it is opposed actually, by environmental communities. However, it's highly lucrative. Pacific salmon is farmed Pacific salmon is the second highest export in Chile. And it was nearly wiped out around 2010, the whole farming industry, due to a couple of disease epidemics. But it is recovered, and it's a politically strong force, so the practice continues. Is the sound that these guys make. So how do I get rid of that thing?
And then just click somewhere.
Okay. So These are guanaco, the only camelids that you see in the very southern part of South America. So, of course, obviously related to alpaca and llamas, but never used as pack animals. They have not been domesticated. They are wild. They're greatly loved by the population. They're pretty common. They are a game animal. They were traditionally hunted rather than used as pack animals, and they continue to be hunted to a small degree. But they're very common, not too shy, and you see them quite frequently. They're smaller than llamas. Moving on. Okay, I'm just gonna go over a few of mammals, and a lot of the mammals are nocturnal. So, and the point that I need to make as I start talking about wildlife is this is not the tropics, and very harsh environment. So we don't see the huge variety of species that are seen in the tropical portions of South America. For example, in the southern Andes, there are only two cervid species. One shown here, the kudu, and then the other is the huemul, which is a critically endangered species, recognized by the International Union of Conservation. And there are probably only a few hundred of them left. A number of the national parks, both in Argentina and in Chile, have actually been established for protection of the huemul. And it is considered the national animal of Chile, but we did have the good fortune of seeing the kudu, but we have not seen the huemul. That's Hueul. These two below that, the foxes are the two species of foxes. They sort of fill the coyote niche. The culpeo is seen in higher elevations. They look fairly similar. They're pretty common. You see them quite frequently, actually. And then I'm going to move on actually to the armadillo. There's a great number of armadillo species throughout South America. There are a couple that are common in Patagonia. And armadillo actually tend to be nocturnal, but this small one here, the peachy armadillo, is fairly commonly seen in daylight, and like armadillos, tends to be rather shy. The common deku is a large rodent, probably the largest rodent in the area. And I show it, it actually has been popular as a pet. It's related to chinchillas and guinea pigs, and so, or hamsters, actually, as you can see. It's not allowed in certain states in the United States, but it continues to be domesticated as an exotic pet. Of course, with all the shoreline there and the straits and everything, there are opportunities to see a wide variety of marine mammals, probably more marine mammals than there are terrestrial mammals in terms of species variety throughout Chile and in Argentina. So I love the San Fernandez fur seal. They're humongous. They remind me of the elephant seals. And then the lower row here is are all introduced species with European colonial settlement. There were a number of species brought in for fur. The idea was to establish fur trade. So mink and beaver, and including the European hare, which is a very large rabbit that you commonly see. I have not seen beaver. They've tried and tried and tried to eradicate beaver. Because that's beaver damage, and as I've talked about, these forests with, their very slow growing trees are absolutely destroyed. By beavers. They have not been able to eradicate them. They try to have control programs, and other activities. Okay, moving on to the birds. Take notes. There will be a quiz on this meeting at the end of the presentation. So, starting with a major subclass of birds that we don't get to see in the northern half of the earth. All the paleognathes are in the southern hemisphere, and they're wonderful birds. So gnat is a reference to their jaw structure and bones and everything. That's what gnat means. Paleo, obviously, they're evolutionarily old. So the paleognathes are like the ostriches, emus, cassowaries, rays, and tinamou. So they're flightless, but for tinamou fly. Tinamou fly like birds that like to run around on the ground. You know, they're sort of reluctant to fly, but they can fly farther. And I show that tinamou tracks here. They have these feet with very long 3 toes, all of these paleognathes. The other interesting feature of paleognathes is the males do the brooding and childbirth or chick rearing. So, and these are the 2 families of paleognathes that you see in Patagonia. Tinamou, there are a number of species of tinamou. I really enjoy them. They tend to be very, very shy and hard to photograph, but these were sort of walking in front of us for a while. The elegant crested tinamou. Okay. So I've sort of organized this taxonomically, and also a little around habitat, but just to give you an idea, there's a lot of water around, so there are a lot of water birds, and when you get species variety, this is kind of the place to look on the water. Huge variety of cormorants. These are all ones that you see along the Chilean coast, even different ones over on the other side, some of them look the same, but lots and lots of cormorants. The Magellanic penguin is characteristic of the mainland-based penguins that we see throughout the southern hemisphere. So it looks very similar to what's called the jack penguin in South Africa, or there is another one also in southern Patagonia, a little bit further, or rather southern South America, that extends a little bit further north than the Magellanic, called the Humboldt penguin. And they all look fairly similar. They're sort of small penguins. They colonize the mainland coast as opposed to other penguins, some of which will breed on some of the outer islands of Chile, some of the other species, but most of them are breeding in Antarctica. And so these are the ones that breed along the mainland coasts. The Chilean pelican looks fairly familiar, but it's a lot bigger than the brown pelican. One of the things that's fun about birding. I haven't done any pelagic birding, out on boats. But you actually see some of the pelagic birds right from the coast, like the Peruvian boobies sitting there. And the Inca tern, a beautiful little bird. And when I first saw it, they were flying around along the coast. And I'm going, wow, I'm actually seeing storm petrels on the beach. So that's how they fly. Real quick, rapid flight. They're a small tern, but just a gorgeous little bird. And then there are a variety of gulls, but some are very common, as you usually see at the coast. Oops. There, turned it off. So the kelp gull, a large gull, not as large as our western gulls, but is very, very common. And then it often is seen foraging and all with this much smaller dark-headed gull called the brown-hooded gull. So moving on to waterfowl that aren't necessarily marine waterfowl, although you do see a lot of these both marine and freshwater. So these are called goose, all of them. They are not goose. They are not geese. They're actually called shelled geese or shelled goose. And as you can see, they don't really look like goose. So they've got those really small bills and they are smaller than a lot of the goose species that we see here. There are no geese in southern South America. They're just these shelled geese. These are 4 of the 5 species that you'll find. They're as you can see, one of the differences besides their small bills is they're sexually dimorphic. And so the white ones of the upland, the kelp, and the Andean are the males. And they're really quite beautiful birds. The male ashy-headed is actually the one with the red breast here. And then there are these 2 swan species that are very, very common. Swan kind of reminds me, in our experience, as I say, we're traveling when a lot of Chileans and Argentinians are traveling. And they seem to really be proud and respectful of their lands and love to be out in them, at least the ones we run into, out hiking around and everything. And when I'm standing around looking in my binoculars, I'm bound to have somebody come up to me and say, "Oh, what are you looking at?" And "Oh, the birds." And I need to learn the birds' names in Spanish because they'll just start, "Well, we have these and this," and I don't know all the Spanish names, but I do know cisnes, and they like their cisnes, which is swans. So the Coscaroba tends to be way down south. The black-necked swan extends pretty much all the way up through this region. Okay, I was always struck by the name of steamer duck, and I really wanted to see them. So there they are. There's both the flying and the flightless. And the flightless, the flying that I'm showing you, those are females, and then the flightless is the male, and it's the bill that really is different. In both species, the male has an all bright orange bill. So We think the reason they're called steamer ducks is, neither of them likes to fly all that much. Now, you can tell the difference. They look very similar, but you can kind of tell the difference. If you look at the wing on this flightless, I mean, look, there's not a lot of wing there. And you can see that it's much larger on the flying steamer duck. But neither of them likes to fly very much, and the way they like to move, they're usually on the water, is they just run across it, sort of flapping their wings. And so they think that old sailors would see these ducks, and they were reminded of the steamers, so they called them steamer ducks. So that's where the name comes from. But anyway, fun and pretty common. Okay, so there is a lot of variety of waterfowl as well. These are ones that tend to be more resident. We also see a lot of our species down there as well. Blue-winged teal is common, cinnamon teal. A number of our species can be seen, and a lot of them are migratory. Some may be resident as well. But I selected this group. You can see with the English names, the common names that are given them, that they are closely related to, for example, the Chilean widgeon, as you can see, looks a lot like an American widgeon. It has that lighter crown. They're beautiful, very common duck. I put up the yellow-billed pintail and the yellow-billed teal because they are fairly closely related. You can see the pintail, you can kind of get an idea of the pintail's tail. The yellow-billed teal was a recent taxonomic split from what was called the speckled teal. And when you see both of them, both the yellow-billed pintail and the yellow-billed teal out of water, they have speckled breasts. Anyway, the reason I put them up there is that they hybridize quite a bit, and I actually think I photographed a hybridizing pair here. This being the pintail, and that one is the teal. Moving on, just teal, silver teal, the speckled ducks, not something that I really compare to with any of our species. But if you look at the shoveler, it's a little hard to see, but that large shoveler bill, crested duck is very common. The lake duck, there are several stiff-tailed ducks, look very similar to our reddies. This one's actually quite a bit larger than the reddy duck, but clearly a different species, but looks very similar. Doesn't have the little white cheek that ours does. Whoops, I did it again. Now it's just all the way to the end. Where did that happen? So maybe I can get back there. Yeah, I'm really gonna get through these slides. I don't have a whole lot of. Okay. Anything else? Oh, the number of variety of breeds, as I mentioned, the hooded grebe is the critically endangered, but there are a lot of other breeds. And then a large variety of coots as well. very difficult to distinguish it. You have to really look at the bill to distinguish them. The waders actually most of the waders that you see and throughout South America are the same waders that we see. So for example, the black crown night heron is very, very common. A lot of the same waders. What's interesting is you don't see great blue heron. They're not dominant, but sort of filling the niche is this koi heron, which is very common and, sort of seen in the same places that we would see the great blue heron. And then the flamingos. There are 3 species of flamingos. The Chilean, I think, is the largest. A very interesting wader in that they have webbed feet. And I've never seen them. I usually see them in shallow waters like this, but they will actually swim because of their webbed feet. So an unusual wader.
Are they in the Lake District or what?
No, actually, they're all the way down, and then where you see the.
What was the question?
Oh, thank you. I was asked if they were in the Lake District, which sort of think of. But they actually extend all the way down, and then where you see the large collections of them are in the salt marshes of the Andean Altiplano. So, and actually further north. So, this is the most common ibis. Can't really hear it. But it's one of the sounds of the city, actually. These guys hang out in yards and things like that. They're very, very common. So interesting. It's kind of the cousin of the white-faced ibis. It's got the black instead. There are white-faced ibis. Yeah. So the southern blackwing, if anybody has birded in South America and been in a city, they're familiar with this noisy bird. They fly around in huge flocks. But its species name, its scientific name is, I need to remember, is Varilla silensis. And it's a Chilean. This again. So it's actually its native land is Chile or southern South America, and it has rapidly expanded throughout South America, all the way up into Central America now. So it's a very, very common bird, the southern lapwing, but started in Chile. So the shorebirds are just amazing to me. I show here both our Arctic breeding ones that go all the way from the Arctic and spend our winters and their summers down there. So the Hudsonian godwit and the Hudsonian whimbrel. Well, the Hudsonian, we have the marbled godwit in the West Coast. The Hudsonian godwit, East Coast, migrates on the East Coast up to the Arctic. The Hudsonian whimbrel actually just split, and it used to just be called the whimbrel, but it's now been split. The Hudsonian whimbrel is the one that we see migrating along our coast. And then the white-rumped sandpiper migrates on the East Coast. So all the way from the southern South America to the Arctic where they breed. Likewise, the American oyster catcher. Some are actually resident in Chile, so they don't migrate, but others are migratory. It's also one that we see in North America. Now, the blackish oyster catcher is really interesting. I mean, it's the blackish oyster catcher. It's not the black oyster catcher. It looks identical. And so the way you tell them is you see they're different species. you see the black oyster catcher in North America, and you see the blackish oyster catcher in South America. They look identical, but they're different birds, and they're more resident. And then, the snipe, typical, hangout in fresh wetlands, fairly common. There are a number of resident plovers. I've shown them probably the most common one. They're very small, the banded plovers, and there are some larger plovers as well. And then the tawny-throated dotterel, kind of a plover-like a shorebird as well, is very interesting. It's never on the coast. You find it inland, breeds completely, and it's resident. And then this bottom one here, the least sea snipe, is not a shorebird. It's a small family of birds, sea snipes. There are only 4 species. And the least is the most commonly seen. It's in the lowlands. The other 3 species are more commonly seen in the upper reaches. Well, you can sort of hear it. So this is the only occipiter species that we see in the southern South America. The Chilean hawk. It's very common in the hardwood forests that I talked about. More southern. As you get further north, you don't see as many of them, but it's a very, very common hawk seen in the forest, and behaves as occipiters do, chasing little birds. So this is Boodio that, in my mind, kind of fills the niche that our red-tailed hawk does. It's extremely common in the area, and aptly called variable, because a common morph is this red-backed. Another name for it is red-backed hawk. But they don't all have red backs. This one is actually, and it's more often the females that have the red back and that coloring. You can see a European rabbit that hit the dust here. And that's what that bird is on. And this is a male probably, and it doesn't have the red shoulders on it at all. Real characteristic of it is the white tail. That you can see in the female and the bird flying away here. So common hawk. So the Harris's hawk is a bird that's familiar in the southwestern United States, and probably heading. So you see Harris's hawks in the southwestern United States, and you see them in the southern portion of South America. And then nothing in between. And so one of the so there's likely to be a split soon. They're really advocating for a split of the southwestern or the North America remaining the Harris's hawk, and the southern. The South American one will probably become the bay-winged hawk. It hasn't happened yet, but there's a lot in the literature about it. They're very, very different in behavior. The North American Harris's hawk is very gregarious and hangs about in family groups. This one you find solitary, and very different foraging patterns and everything. So a few other raptors. You'd think with all this grass that there'd be a huge variety of raptors. There aren't. The harrier, there are a couple of harrier species. This is the one that you see most commonly. I like the Spanish name of this Águila mora, which means Moorish eagle in Spanish. It is not an eagle. Its English name is black-chested buzzard eagle. buzzard is often the name given to bootios in the southern hemisphere. But the locals refer to this as an eagle. It's actually the same genus as the variable hawk that I just showed. So it's a buteo. It's very, very large and quite common in some areas. And then, of course, the Andean condor, it's doing very well in the southern portion of the Andes. It was kind of persecuted in the more northern Andes, and there are lower population levels there. But it's very common, and all you have to do is be in the mountains and look up, and you're probably looking at condors, but way often. So for people who are familiar with you may be, because they do extend into southwestern United States. Familiar with this behavior, but when I first saw it, I was really struck by it. They have a response to threat. And Terry and I were walking up on this the youngster here, who at the time was on the ground. And I started hearing that, you couldn't hear it very well, but that sort of rattling sound. And saw this guy, and the behavior is they take their neck and throw it back, and then they come forward with this sort of rattly sound. And it's a response to threat. So he was sort of, telling the kid he needed to get up because there was a threat on board. They're sort of related to puffins, tend to be scavengers, and both the crested and this one are common throughout Patagonia. This little guy, much smaller than the crested Tartara. Just acting like scavengers too. I had to include a little bit about pigeons and doves because I just think that Chilean pigeon, and unfortunately the photograph isn't the greatest, is a gorgeous bird. It's very, very shy, lives in the forest. It's a very big pigeon that when you can see it in its iridescence and everything, its coloring is really quite beautiful. The eared dove was kind of a city bird, very common throughout South America. Actually, if you've birded, you've probably seen the eared dove, and there are also a number of brown doves. So, in species of the parrot in this region, and this one. The austral is the most common. It is sort of range expanding. You find it in cities and that sort of thing now. But they, as you often see with parrots, they're in large flocks, very noisy. When they're around. A more local range in sort of the Valdivian forest of western Chile is this, the slender-billed parakeet. And as you can see a little bit, it does have a very long, slender bill. It looks otherwise a lot like that austral parakeet. A little bit different sound. Again, very colonial, very gregarious, always in flocks. This is a very interesting bird. It's very rare in Chile, quite common actually in Paraguay and Argentina, and called the burrowing parakeet because that's what it does. It burrows into soft banks and everything, and that's where it nests. So, again, not a lot of species. There are only 2 hummingbird species that are actually constantly peeping away. But I chased around the camera and it doesn't even light, it just is in constant movement, a very small hummingbird. Oh, before I go on here, whoops, I did it now. The other species of hummingbird, which I haven't photographed, is called the giant hummingbird. And that's a really accurate name because it's as big as many of our small sparrows. And while it flies like a hummingbird, you know, that sort of helicopter stuff and go backwards and everything, it's quite slow. And you can even actually see the wing flap of it. So, okay, now we're getting to, see if I can get this. Where's the play? The first time I did this was, what I was looking for, this was really characteristic of the radiation. I chased it everywhere and could not find it. So, I think it was actually down, and also above me. As you know, there are a number of different pygmy owls. So this is, ours is the northern, and this is very southern, austral, that's what southern means. And it looks very much like our pygmy owl. You can't really see that long little tail that sticks off of it because the leaves are in front of it. But the difference is, it doesn't have the eyes on the back of the head. Very sought after species for the birding in Chile and Argentina. The English name I don't like so much, it's called Magellanic woodpecker, so I'll use the Spanish and helping for I had some recording with a hammer and I mean, look at that bill. It's the largest woodpecker in South America. Terry thinks it's the model for woody woodpecker. If you look at it. So that's the male, or macho, and this is the female, lying in it. Very beautiful, very vocal. Like some of our woodpeckers, they hang around in large family groups. And they're talking to each other and foraging away. Really beautiful, large fun birds to find. So again, only and then the final one is sort of like our little, you know, ladderbacks and kind of woodpeckers, a much smaller woodpecker. This, of course, is a female. That are huge in the southern hemisphere. So sub-Aucenes are a subclass of passerines. And they are so they're perching birds, related to songbirds, but what is different about them is their vocalizations. They're quite limited. So it includes a number of families, including flycatchers. So in the northern hemisphere, you know, we really only have flycatchers. We don't have this other huge group that I'm going to go through called ovenbirds. They're not, you know, our ovenbird warbler. it's a whole huge subclass of birds. Not subclass, I'm sorry, suborder of birds, sub-Aussings. And so, and you'll see the family, the variety of this group, the ovenbirds, is tremendous. The Symploides, number of species of them, are hang around water. And they have very simple vocalizations, just like our flycatchers, not the complex songs of songbirds. And so, that therefore the sub-Aussing as opposed to the songbird Aussings. So these have these high-pitched peeps. When you're standing around water, you can hear them, the high-pitched peeps. Another tree runners, they're ovenbirds of another whole family. And you hear the trill sounds and peeps are pretty much the vocalizations that they make. This is a very, very common forest bird. It reminds me a lot of our nuthatches in its behavior, except as you see, it can't climb down the trees because its tail is too long. But they're very, very common, large flocks, a lot of noise when they're around, but it's just peeps and seeps and that kind of stuff. Yet another of the other. The bamboo species that you find in the region. It's just thick throughout the forest. It's called foliage. And it is often full of little guys like this, other kinds of other birds and that sort of thing. Yet another thing, those fixed twine-tails. Little brown jogs, most of them, and simple vocalizations, but huge families of them in terms of species variety and everything. So here are the examples. So there, as I said, there are ovenbirds. Another name for them is Funerids, and they're called ovenbirds because of their nesting characteristics, which I'll show to you in a minute. Funerid is taken from Latin and means like vapor. As I said, a lot of them are due to their nesting practices. One of the unique nesting practices belongs to the miners. I show a couple of miners down below who actually burrow. But otherwise, they build these phenomenal nests, as in here. Now you can see why they're called the ovenbirds. If you look at the nest of the Rufus ornero, ornero meaning maker of ovens, that looks just like an old-fashioned bread oven. So that's where they get their names from. Others, like the Cachalotes and some of those other species that I showed you, build these giant, they're little tiny birds, but they build giant stick and mud nests in trees like this. So that's where the ovenbirds really comes from. Another large family of sub-Aussings are the papaculos. These are birds that you can find different species throughout South America. They tend to scurry around, they're very shy, tend to scurry around on the ground, don't fly a whole lot. There are a number of species in this region. So moving on to, this is the one that you probably see the most commonly. See if I can't really hear the vocalization. They're more often heard than seen. And actually, this one song, which is a trill, kind of for a trill, I call it the song of the forest. It's so commonly heard. So, and it's the one that the locals seem to know. When I talk to them about tapaculos, they actually say chupado and not tapaculo. Oh, you're talking about chupado. Well, no, I'm looking for another one, but. This one is an ancient.
Is it repeated?
And like, yeah. So we said that actually it's named stuff like that. Typical of them, as I said, This is a tiny little one. It looks like a wren, actually. As you can see, they all pop up their tails. So there's an agile cool, real cute little bird. And it's not look at Chicago and the Magellanic bird, and then changes out of the vegetation a little bit more, but certainly still Okay, so the other Sobosines and huge family. Now they're all New World flycatchers, so the pirate family of flycatchers. It just innumerable species of flycatchers throughout our southern hemisphere. There are I picked the sample, or actually my camera picks a sample. That's what I can take pictures of. But just to give you an idea of the variety, I will mention the fire-eyed deoquin. Very common, not very shy. And it was kind of interesting when we were staying in Torres del Paine. We were there several days, and one of the workers at the place we were staying, finally he'd seen me coming in every day with my binocular and the camera, and finally he came up to me and he said, "It's a bird that hangs around my house, and it's always there, and it has orange eyes." So I said, "Oh, this is what it is." But he had noticed it. They are very common and not at all shy. The Patagonian tyrant kind of reminds me of our infants. It's a little tiny little bird that flits around in the foliage. And just some other examples. The Austral negrito and spectacled tyrant are common and interesting because, we don't usually think of flycatchers as being sexually dimorphic, but both these species are. The males are the black ones, and then the females, as you can see, are quite different in appearance. When we're birding in South America, one of the flycatchers, or a number of the flycatchers you're going to see, are the Elania. The white-crested Elania is the only one that you see in this area, and you can kind of hear the vocalization. To me, it's the other sound of the forest. They're very common, and you're constantly hearing this sort of simple vocalization as you're walking through the forest. You can kind of get an idea of the white crown. It's not like a blue cannon kinglet. It often has its crown up showing it's white. And this little tick tyrant is a real cute little thing, very common as well. You often find it in cities. of a reminder, much more complex vocalization. And I have to mention the southern house wren because when I first started birding in South America, it was just the house wren that I added to my list. But they've recently split, and now there are all sorts of house wrens. But the southern house wren is now different. We're called the northern house wren here. And if you can hear the vocalization at all, it really is quite distinct from our house wren. So good reason for us to. Sorry about the photograph, but I had to include this. It's a strikingly beautiful and pretty common bird, but it doesn't look any photograph taken on this. This is the male, and the plant cutter is an absolutely apt name for it. It has actually kind of toothed bill, and it actually pulls at leaves and fruit and that sort of thing and eats them. It has been persecuted because it was thought to cause crop damage. It's in no way endangered or anything. That has kind of stopped. The realization is it's not very destructive of agriculture. But it has undergone recent reclassification, which I thought was kind of interesting. It was considered part of the thrush family, but more recently they realized that it's part of the Cotinga family, which is a southern family, a southern hemisphere family of birds, generally tropical, very bright colored, and fruit eating. So interesting reclassification due to genetic testing. And everywhere you go, you're gonna get your tourist genus. And this is the austral thrush, as you can see, extremely robin-like. We're not there during singing season, but it does have a typical kind of robin song. But you know, as robins are, it's very vocal and another sound that you hear a lot of, that sort of yeah. Two species of mockingbirds. This is the one that we find more commonly in the southern and eastern portion of Patagonia. And it's typical mockingbirds and singing and everything. It has it there. In Chile, in the more arid areas, is the Chile. Okay, so Sierra finches. They're a large family of birds, often fairly colorful. And until quite recently were considered part of the sparrow family. The genetics have recently indicated that they're more closely related to tanagers. And so they're kind of being moved into that family. And if you listen to that sing-songy vocalization, you can tell you know, that it's really quite close to tanagers. And these lovely guys are also quite common. Another Sierra finch that you find in the more arid parts, not quite as colorful, also very iridescent. And then likewise with this, while it's not called the Sierra finch, its classification is closely related to Sierra finches, and it's been moved into the tanager class recently. So this guy is also very common seen in cities and rurally as well. So moving on, there aren't a lot of sort of sparrow family birds in this portion of the world. Anybody who's birded in South America is very familiar with the only thing that's called a sparrow in English is the rufous collared sparrow. This bird is throughout South America. These others, these grass finches on the top, There are sort of grass finches throughout South America with sort of local ranges. So you find them in different areas. People who birded in Central America will be familiar with, I think it's called a canary finch, very bright yellow that you find on lawns and everything. And then yet another Sierra finch looks very similar to that Patagonian Sierra finch, but has a much more local range. So moving on to the blackbirds, this is also kind of beautiful meadow. Doesn't sing as beautifully as ours. So that you see the male, of course, with the rose color. And then, yeah, I had to show you, their cowbirds are as bad as our cowbirds. That's, a Diuca finch that's feeding this cowbird. Yeah. So, the shiny cowbird, similar story to our brown-headed cowbird. Great range expansion, probably due to, land conversion associated with livestock, just like our brown-headed cowbird. Finally, the systems. There are a number of system species, but the only one that you see commonly in this area. And a few of the trees.
Hey, Kim.
So.
Kim,
The Alerce grows in the hardwood forests. This one here on the right. And it's the second oldest tree in the world behind the square. They're very, very old trees still around, and obviously they have been logged, so there's a considerable loss, and there's a lot of land protection now to protect the Alerce. Beautiful. It's not a southern beech. It's actually a conifer, which I didn't know because I've never seen the cone, but it's just a striking tree, and they're quite huge. The Chilean palm is the only palm tree, but it is native. But it's the only palm tree. It's found actually in the more northern reaches of Chile. And then the Araucaria, also called the monkey-bellied tree, is actually maybe familiar if you could see it there in that photo, because it is used as an ornamental tree in some places. But those are just examples that the trees are stunning.
what was the range of the other thing?
So throughout the area, yeah, in the hardwood forest, so Valdivian forest, down in the Andes, down in the southern portion here of Fuego, where the hardwood forest. So it has a fairly.
We got about 5 minutes.
Well, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say the question, but I was asked what it was the range of the Alerce. So anyway, that's it. So my timing was okay, but it wasn't a lot of time for questions. Yes.
I'm curious, does Merlin work in South America?
Yeah.
What's the question?
So the question is, does Merlin work? So yeah, it identifies crested caracara. I actually have never used Merlin on site. I record and I use Merlin to listen to my recordings, and it doesn't get most of it. So it's just a matter of getting the data. And there are a lot of obviously very good South American birders, so that data is being entered into Merlin, and more it will work as you travel. So yeah.
When are you going back?
In 2 weeks.
Thanks, Kim. Very nice.